Okay, this is a very impromptu video. I hope you can follow this, and I'm using a free open source screen recorder, so it may not be of the best quality, but it's a start. So to begin, you'll open BobCad. This is version 31, and again, another apology. My kids and wife are in the background yelling at each other, so you'll probably hear that too. Anyway, version 31 is open. Make sure you open it by right-clicking on the icon and run with high performance graphics processor to just make sure the better video card is being used. Okay, from here we'll go open the step file. Sorry, it's being a little laggy, I think, as I'm controlling the other software at the same time. And all supported files. Quantity 3. Open. So in this case, it opens in a somewhat neutral, useful orientation. You can see that the global Z is at the bottom of the part, but to be honest, that's really not that important in this case. So just looking at this part, it looks like it's a good candidate to cube, meaning I'm just going to leave more material below the bottom of the part. I'm going to stick it in the vise and then face mill it and mill the periphery and then flip it back over, hold it in a vise like so, and then flip and deck the other side to size and be done with it. So if this is a 1/2 inch part, I'm probably going to make it out of that 5/8 material so that I can clean up all faces. So to begin with, it's best to open the file and then immediately go to save as, and then you're going to save it as a BobCad file. That way if something crashes, you don't lose everything you've done. And the most important rule of any software is save and save often, so keep that in mind. All right, from here, we can just, in our CAD cam tree, again, there's a lot in to know, but in the basics of the workflow, we're just going to go from that direction here. So we'll right click and do a new job. This new job will be a milling, and right now you won't have any of these machines set up for your preferences, so it's not that important, but we could create a machine with the spindle, max spindle speed, feed rate, if it had tool changer, number of tools, all of that could be done so that we could select that here. So we'll OK, you'll see we get our basic milling setup. So if we just follow down top to bottom, right now we can define stock, but also you see my default material here under stock is aluminum. And from that comes the speeds and feeds, but if I didn't want material, aluminum material, then I can come in here and choose any of the above. For now, I'll leave that alone. So general process here, you're going to create stock. So just right click, go to stock wizard. You have all kinds of options for stock, but again, we're just going to go with basic stock. So when you do it, from the get-go, it's just calculating stock based on what the model size is. If you know that you're going to use a 3D toolpath and you want it to machine outside of the part, then you're going to add extra stock, and you can do that at each axis itself, or you can go to overall stock size, which is here, and if I want some sort of stock difference, let's just say for now, in the Z, I want to put a negative, if it's going to let me. There we go. My mouse is being glitchy now too. So 0.125. And now It's just being super glitchy. And you can see it adds that stock below that surface. It's best to make this stock the size of the stock that you're actually using, unless you know that you have some other ulterior motive, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So if we can close this. Okay, stock's been created. I made a major change, so I'm going to save it. Done deal. Now in machine setup, this is where we are setting our machine to X. So in other words, our datum, our G54, 55, whatever you're using. So in order to modify this, we can right click and edit. From here, we get these grip points. So if we know we want center of stock, I can come to origin, click that radio button, click that, but that's not really exactly the orientation I wanted in. So I want to change my X direction. There's a few ways. I can click this and click the direction. So there's one way. I could just flip it. So I can do that for all the axes until I get the orientation I want. This is the orientation I want. So I'll just OK that. And again, I'll save. So now everything's kind of set up the way we want it. We've got two basic ways of doing it. We either do this 3-axis or we can do it 2-axis. I think in general 3-axis is the better way because it knows where your material, your stock is, this or your model, and it doesn't really allow you to make a mistake and machine something you didn't intend to machine. So we're just going to fly through this and create something and modify it. We'll do this. Here's your two basic options here. Within these, there's a million other options, but we'll start with mill 3-axis. And if we go to machining strategy, we've got a ton of machining strategies, but in basic start out, we're probably either going to use advanced rough or just a Z-level rough. And Z-level rough has less options, but computes very quickly, so we'll just go with Z-level rough. And we kind of just go through here, and by arrowing to next or clicking on next, it just moves us down through our options. I will use arc fit and set my arc fit tolerance to 1/1000th of an inch. And from here then, we're going to select a tool, and this tool, we can either just modify this by putting something in these input boxes, or we could go to the tool crib. We can set up the tool crib exactly how we want. So I want to end mill rough. I'm going to add it from the tool library, and I can arrow down through here, but here we go. We'll pick that tool. And if I have this checked, just use automatic tool numbering, for my features that come up over here, it's just going to go through 1 through whatever as I have them selected and create that tool number. If I don't have it checked, it's going to use what was in the tool library, but I can also just override it here. Just by double clicking, I could override that. So for now, we'll check that and pick, call that good. You can see I don't have a corner radius, it's actually a 1/2 inch end mill. Whether it's actually roughing or it's a 2 flute or it's a 4 flute, it's kind of unimportant at this point. You just need to make sure whatever you put in the machine matches what you're programming. I'm going to take these inputs depending on the machine. Now, if it were the machine in the back room, then I know my max spindle speed, I think it's maybe 3600, but in general we run at about 2500 at max, and you can see it updates speeds and feeds automatically. Come down through here. Do we want to pocket in or we want to pocket out? Well, I want to pocket in from the outside, so that's correct, and I do want to climb mill. Depth of cut and step over. So the safest way I've found is doing a high feed milling, which is a shallow depth cut and a large step over. So shallow depth cut, we'll just say 25 thousandths, and a step over of, we'll go with 0.2, a little less than half the cutter. From here, we can set an allowance if we want to leave material in the XYZ. Let's just say I want to leave 5 thousandths on all surfaces. Machining tolerance 0.001. That'll just help it compute a little faster. And do I want to ignore the holes or cut the holes? Well, there's no real holes, but it's always kind of a good idea to just ignore the holes. And if I don't pick the bottom of job, then it's just going to go to the very bottom of the model. And if I want to pick the bottom of the job, I can do that. I just come over here, select, and OK that. And then you'll see it populates here so that I know, oh, okay, so I want to go negative 0.550. Make sure it gets past the bottom, plus I did leave 5 thousandths here, so I want to make sure it gets past it. Leads, obviously how it's going to enter the part. In this case, this is also where the high feed milling with the shallow depth passes saves you sometimes, in that it's just a shallow plunge anyway. So I'm just going to go, actually I'm going to do ramp. This is usually a pretty good default to keep things from smashing. It's going to go at an angle and feed into the part at a maximum length of 3 inches and approach angle of 3 degrees. So I can change it from left to right or right to left with putting a ramp direction of 0 or 1 there. And this is a handy feature. If I only want to do the outermost of the part, it will do that. Or if I want to do the innermost of the part, it'll do that from here. But really, there's no... Let me just compute this and finish my last thought. Oh, nothing to compute yet. I didn't select the geometry, so I'll just right click, select the geometry, and good practice to just pick the whole model. Right click, OK, and then right click again, compute, and you'll see, so at that 3 inch lead in, well, that's kind of overkill, right? But also it didn't machine the outside of this like I want it to, right? Well, why didn't it do that? Well, it didn't do it because there's no extra stock outside those. So in order to get it to do it, I just right click here. Actually, let me save this. Then we right click, go back to our stock wizard, change, and you can see what it's calling Y and it's calling X. So we're going to change our X to 6 and our Y to 6.5. Say OK to that. Now when I compute this, I didn't leave quite enough material, so I need to go add some extra material, right? So by manipulating the stock, essentially you can get a different outcome. Now let me go edit my leads. And I could edit this length, but to be honest, I don't need to. I'm just going to go with the plunge. And from here, I can pick whether I want to peck into the material or I want a fast peck, which means it just backs up a bit and doesn't go to retract. But to be honest, I don't want any of that. I just want to plunge right into the part. All of a sudden, that stuff's gone, right? So if I keep manipulating my stock, then eventually I'll have enough material outside. So if I say 6.5, and this has everything to do with that step over amount as well. And OK it. Right click compute. So the point here is that, first I set up my G54 based on the center of the stock, saved it. Now I modify my stock to get my outcome to make sure it machines where I want it to machine. And then it's just that easy, right? But I left 5 thousandths everywhere. So there's a couple ways we could do this in order to clean it up. Also, if I right click, I can blank this so I don't see it. I can also blank my stock, right click, like that. So now I'm just looking at my part. Again, save and save.